So, you're a founder in Europe and you've got your sights set on the ultimate prize, the US market. But let's be real, making that transatlantic leap is one of the toughest, most daunting challenges you'll ever face. So what's the right way to do it? Well, today we're going to break down the playbook based on some amazing insights from Index Ventures to help you make that leap a massive success. All right, so here's the game plan. First, we'll get into why the rules have totally changed with what we're calling the transatlantic leap. Then, we'll cover the born transatlantic mindset you absolutely need to have. From there, we'll dive right into the core of the playbook, a framework to help you find your unique expansion archetype. And finally, we'll get tactical and talk about execution, when to go, who to send, and of course, where to land.
First up, the transatlantic leap. You know, for decades, founders pretty much thought there was only one path to the US, just one set of rules. But guess what? That old playbook has been completely torn up, and it's created a new, and honestly, a much more complex American dream.
You know, this little story about a name, it actually gets at a really big idea. For years, founders felt like they had to Americanize everything, not just their names, but their entire companies right at the border. The big insight today is that that's just not true anymore. Success isn't about erasing your identity, it's about blending the best of both worlds. Knowing when to tweak your sales pitch for a US audience, but also knowing when your European roots are actually your greatest strength.
And you know, this way of thinking didn't happen overnight. It's really evolved through three distinct waves. Before 2010, it was all about the transplant era. You literally got to move everything, lock, stock, and barrel. Then the 2010s brought the hybrid approach. The idea was to scale up in Europe first and then expand. But the limits of those models have led us to right now, the born transatlantic era, where you're building for a global market from day one. Okay, so that leads us right into the born transatlantic mindset. And this isn't just some catchy trend. It's a fundamental shift in strategy that really demands a whole new playbook. And this right here, this is the core of it. The question isn't an afterthought anymore. It's not, how do we expand to the US? It's, how do we build a global company from day one? That means US expansion has to be baked into the company's DNA from the very beginning. It's about having the vision and, honestly, the courage to build a company that can compete in the world's toughest market right out of the gate. So what's behind this massive shift? Well, it's really four key things. First, remote work has made distributed teams totally normal. Then you have the AI boom, which is creating this huge gravitational pull of talent and capital towards the US. And this is a big one. A widening spending gap means US companies are just buying more technology faster. All of this is fueling a massive resurgence in Silicon Valley as the undisputed center of innovation. And look, if you need just one number to drive this whole thing home, here it is. By 2029, the US enterprise software market is expected to hit $195 billion. That's more than double the size of Europe's market. Just think about that. For a startup, closing just a few big US deals can completely change its entire trajectory. That's why this matters so much.
So the big question is, how do you actually do it? All right, let's get into the heart of the playbook, a framework designed to help you find your strategic path from a set of four very distinct archetypes.
Okay, so this whole framework really boils down to two critical questions. First, what percentage of your total addressable market, your TAM, is actually in the US? In other words, out of everyone you could possibly sell to in the entire world, how many of them are in America? It's that classic rule, you've got to follow the money. Is the US just a small slice of your pie, or is it the whole dessert? The second question is all about your go-to-market strategy. I mean, can you sell and serve your customers from thousands of miles away with a self-serve product? Or do you really need a team on the ground, shaking hands, building relationships, and closing those big enterprise deals? All right, so depending on how you answer those two questions, you're gonna fall into one of these four strategic archetypes: the magnet, the anchor, the pendulum, or the telescope. Let's break down what each of these road-tested playbooks actually looks like. First up, we've got the magnet. This one is for you if over half of your market is in the US and you need enterprise sales to win. For you, the US is your true north. The strategy here is pretty clear. Build your amazing product in Europe, but sell it in the US. Now, this is a huge commitment. It often means the CEO and the entire commercial leadership team have to relocate, just like Calibra did to go win the data intelligence market. Next up is the anchor. This one applies if Europe is actually your bigger market, but the US is just way too big to ignore. The strategy here is to stay anchored to your home base while you build out a strong, autonomous US team.
Your goal isn't total US domination, but to strategically capture that valuable 15 to 30% of the market. A great example is how Aegean protected its European core while making really smart inroads in the US.
Then we have the Pendulum. And let me tell you, this might be the most difficult one to manage. This is for when both Europe and the US are absolutely critical to your success. Your whole organization is forced to swing back and forth between these two centers of gravity. It's a constant balancing act. Leadership, key teams, they eventually spread out across both continents. Spotify is the classic and very complex example of a successful pendulum company.
And finally, the telescope. For product-led companies, this is basically the dream scenario. You can capture a massive US market share entirely from a distance using self-serve growth and digital channels. Your core team stays in Europe, which saves a ton on operational costs. The perfect example here is King, which completely conquered the US gaming market with Candy Crush, all while operating from the other side of the Atlantic.
Okay, so once you've figured out your archetype, it's time to talk execution. Let's tackle the two absolute make or break decisions. When do you actually go, and who do you send to lead the charge?
Now, the data on timing is just staggering. A few years ago, only about a third of companies expanded to the US at the seed stage. Today, that number has nearly doubled to 64%. The takeaway here is crystal clear. If you wait until you're Series A or B, you might already be too late. The pressure to be born transatlantic is very, very real.
Now for the next huge question. Who leads the charge? This is the classic dilemma, right? Do you send a founder? That's the strongest possible signal of commitment, and it's the best way to instill your company's DNA on the ground. Or do you hire an experienced local leader? They bring an instant network and deep cultural expertise, but you always run the risk of creating a disconnect with HQ. There is no easy answer here, and the trade-offs are immense.
And this quote just nails the urgency of it all. The real risk isn't going too early and maybe failing. The real risk is waiting too long. You get calcified in your home market, your product, your organization, everything, and that just makes the leap harder and harder. At some point, you just have to go for it.
Finally, let's talk location. You've decided to go, you know when, you know who, but where exactly do you plant your flag? This is the final crucial piece of the strategic puzzle.
For years, people were predicting the decline of Silicon Valley. Oh, they were wrong, big time. Driven by the AI boom, the Bay Area is back with a vengeance. Its share of new European hubs has just exploded from 28% to nearly half. And why? Because that sheer concentration of AI talent, partners, and investors creates a gravitational pull that is almost impossible to resist if you're in that space. But the Bay Area isn't your only option. The two main hubs present a really clear choice. You go to the Bay Area if you're in AI or deep tech, and you absolutely need access to that unmatched engineering talent, but you gotta be ready for a brutal time zone difference. You choose New York if you're in fintech or media, and you need deep commercial and go-to-market talent, plus a much friendlier time zone for collaborating with Europe. Ultimately, the right choice depends entirely on where your customers and your future talent are. So here's the crucial takeaway. The playbook for transatlantic success has fundamentally changed. And while the journey is definitely more complex, the strategic paths are more varied and clearer than ever before. You now have the framework to choose your own. So the only question left is the one on your screen. Are you ready to make the leap?